basically our marketplace, our drivers and merchants, they serve so many different needs that people prefer to get that from one app versus many different apps.
There might be certain features or even products as a whole that are enabled just in different markets. So how do you go about creating a platform that is strong enough to give you that flexibility to switch features and other functionality on and off?
So our general mindset is what we call internally like 80-20.
That's insane. You guys have I was checking yesterday, market valuation of over $15 billion and you achieve profitability.
Yeah, we're pretty happy.
I know you are in a three-sided marketplace, which makes it even more challenging, right? You have the drivers, you have the customers, you have the merchants. So how do you go about identifying leading indicators for each of those groups?
Hey, this is Carlos's AI voice clone. Carlos is the CEO of Product School and the host of the Product Podcast. He asked me to set the stage for today's guest before he takes over the interview. Philipp Kandal is the Chief Product Officer at Grab, Southeast Asia's leading super app, serving over 40 million monthly active users across 8 countries. Originally launched as a taxi hailing service in Malaysia, Grab has grown into Southeast Asia's #1 super app. Today, it offers a wide range of services, from ride-hailing and food delivery to groceries and digital banking. In 2018, Grab acquired Uber's Southeast Asia business, and in 2021, it went public on the NASDAQ. The company is now valued at around $20 billion, is profitable, and generated $2.8 billion in revenue last year, with 19% year-over-year growth. Philipp joined Grab in 2019 and has been instrumental in shaping its product strategy. He oversees product design and analytics and also leads Grab's Geo business, which powers hyperlocal mapping and location intelligence. In this episode, you'll learn the pros and cons of a super app strategy, how a hyperlocal approach helps Grab outperform global competitors like Uber, how to identify the right use cases for product expansion, the role of user immersions in improving driver and consumer experiences, how Grab structures its product teams and tech families for efficiency, how AI is used to personalize user experiences, the key metrics Grab tracks, including fulfillment and consumer love, how computer vision is being used to solve real-world problems across Southeast Asia. Let's dive in.
This episode is brought to you by Persona, the adaptable identity platform that helps businesses fight fraud, meet compliance requirements, and build trust. For example, how can you know you're really listening to me, Carlos, and not my AI voice clone? These days, it's easier than ever for fraudsters to steal voices, faces, and identities. That's where Persona comes in, helping leading companies such as LinkedIn, OpenAI, Etsy, and Twilio to securely verify individuals and businesses worldwide, going far beyond traditional identity checks. Of course, every company has different needs depending on its industry, use cases, risk tolerance, and user demographics. That's why Persona provides flexible building blocks that allow you to build tailored verification flows that maximize conversion while minimizing risk automatically. Whether you work at a startup or large enterprise, listeners to the Product Podcast can get started for free by visiting withpersona.com/product school. That's withpersona.com/product school. Welcome to the show, Philipp.
Thank you very much for having me, Carlos.
I'm excited to have you for many reasons. One of them is that it's not often that we have a chief product officer from a leading company in the Southeast Asia. You are the CPO at Grab, which is the leading super app in Southeast Asia. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, thanks again very much for having me. So you're right, Grab is the leading super app in Southeast Asia. And for those of your listeners who are not familiar, it means basically we offer mobility services, we offer food delivery, groceries, but also financial services like lending to our drivers and merchants and our consumers, as well as, we run our own grocery chains, banks across the region. So we are serving like 8 countries across Southeast Asia with more than 40 million monthly transacting users.
That sounds absolutely crazy to me, being based in the US where there are not real super apps. So first thing that comes to mind is why do you think that the super app strategy works in Southeast Asia?
I think in our market, organically, we have grown from one service to many services, right? So also we started in transport, right? Grab started out as a taxi hailing company in Malaysia. And basically, we've always followed the needs of our users, right? So in the beginning, it was that our drivers said that they have downtime outside of the peak transport hours and they can transport food as well, right? So that's how we got into that. And then we've been like asked saying like the drivers need like financial services, like loans and so on to finance like access to like vehicles and so on. So I think that's like kind of naturally developed for us. And I think the reason why super apps in Southeast Asia are much stronger in need is because basically our marketplace, our drivers and merchants, they serve so many different needs that people prefer to get that from one app versus like many different apps. So it's like, I mean, what a lot of people in the US will not be aware, let's say for transport, the vast majority of our transport trips are actually on the back of a motorcycle, right? Like you're not like in the US where you're like in the back of an Uber car. For us, it's like on a motorcycle. And then that person can equally transport food, right? Like, so this is like why there's many things which we call like hyperlocal to Southeast Asia that like for people that haven't been maybe not super easy to imagine.
And all of those things make a lot of sense in retrospect, right? You mentioned, oh yeah, the driver needs a bank account. But at the same time, like the classic history, the classic strategy book, at least in the US, would say, well, let's focus on one thing, master it, go very deep. And it seems like you were able to go broad and deep at the same time, right? So from a product standpoint, how did you go about placing those strategic bets?
Yeah. I think the one area where we focus intensely is the mission provides us a lot of focus, right? Like, so we're focused and empowering micro entrepreneurs across Southeast Asia, right? Like, so that's like kind of the mission and the heart of our company, to basically give these drivers an income opportunity, to allow our merchants on the platform to give an income opportunity, right? Like, so that's in a sense where we are very, very focused on serving those customers. And then when we hear that they have other pain points we can solve, we solve those, right? Like, so that's why the services which we offer might sound like super, super broad, but they're all in line with our mission to really like empower these micro entrepreneurs, right? Like, and in terms of, right, like how can we build a service that is so broad? I think it has all to do with a very powerful platform, right? Like, as I said earlier, right, like our drivers can serve many of these different use cases, right? Like with like in Southeast Asia, where it's very common, as I said, like two-wheel transport and so on. So it's like we have like platform teams that like power all the generic infrastructure, and then we have like individual teams that serve the individual use cases. So that's kind of like how we've managed to build without getting stretched too thin. But I mean, yeah, it's definitely like very challenging and very fun all the time.
And it's such a great insight, I think, for a lot of us who are not used to those type of apps. Like, my wife is from Kazakhstan and they use Kaspi like crazy, right? That's another super app. Or China, we have the example of WeChat. I'm sure there are many others. So there's definitely something there. And I wonder if there's also because they kind of skip one technological generation, right? Like a lot of the people maybe not always had access to mainstream laptops and they had to start with mobile first.
Yeah, I do think that's definitely true, right? Like, I mean, for us, basically in Southeast Asia, a lot of people are like smartphone natives, basically, where like that's their first way to get into the internet, and a lot of it has to do with trust, right? Like, I mean, that Grab thankfully has built a very trusted brand. So then they're like, when they get one thing from you, then they're also very open getting other services from you, right? Like, so that's like definitely from a more emerging nascent market. Like, definitely that puts people in a position where they say like, once they have an account with you, once they have like basically like payment services with you, it's a lot easier to offer other things to the user. So I think definitely that there's like what you said, right? Like that the leapfrog directly to smartphones and skipping laptops in many ways and computers is definitely a good reason for that as well.
And it's ultimately a tremendous moat, right? Because once you have a user who is finding value across different use cases and they're literally living on your platform to generate income, to send payments, to do so many different things, like it's very hard to then leave. It's just that getting there, what sounds like an extremely difficult challenge. And I was always curious to know like how you were able to create that type of moat when US-based global competitors like Uber and others tried to penetrate that market. Like, how did you go about kind of ensuring that your product could win there?
I think it has to do with what we call like hyperlocal services, right? Like, I think it has really to do that I think as a company, we're really obsessed about focusing on the needs of each of our countries and what people need there, right? Like, and often cases, these insights is what really differentiate you from a company that comes from a like global perspective, right? Like, I mean, myself having been in San Francisco and moving to Singapore and being in Southeast Asia on the ground all the time, so many things wouldn't have made sense to me back in the day, right? Like, so And just to give you like an example, right? Like, so back in the day when Uber was still operated in our markets, because we acquired Uber's business in the region basically later on. But one of the strong differentiators was that Grab early on accepted cash payments, right? Like Uber came from a US-centric view where credit card payments were standard. And in our region, like a lot of people don't have credit cards, right? Like, so just offering cash payments was one of those things that like here in the region made a ton of sense, but maybe from US-centric view back then didn't make sense, right? Like, and there's many of those things that we've gone like really deep on, right? Like the other thing that we're always sharing is like maps was one of those things, right? Like is like in the US, maps are mostly built for cars. Again, in our region, it's like motorcycles, right? Like, so the pickup that we would have to do for passengers in a narrow side alley that you can't even drive within a car, right? Like, it's just completely non-accessible. And for us, building that maps and building that capabilities to pick up the passenger wherever they are, those are the kind of like hyper-local modes that we have really intensely focused on to win in our markets.
I like the concept of hyper-localization. And I know you have a story around like doing real immersions with your team. Like, why don't you tell us more about it?
Oh yeah, we're like absolutely like obsessed about doing immersions. So basically, an immersion for us means like we go on the ground and live a day in the shoes of our drivers and of our merchants, right? Like, so basically, right, like you would go to like Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, and basically you spend a day like delivering food, for example, right? Like I sometimes also do in Singapore and like cycle around and deliver food. And yeah, I mean, it gives me a lot of like respect for our drivers and like how challenging the job is, right? Like many of them are like 10, 12 hours a day outside in like the weather in Southeast Asia, quite extreme, like very hot and like sometimes like raining like crazy, right? Like, so basically, right? Like, I mean, a few weeks ago, right? Like we did like some deliveries and then basically you really like see how is it on the ground if you're driving through heavy rain and you like barely can read your smartphone. And then you think like, hey, how can we improve the product to make it better for our drivers? How can we make it like better for our consumers? And that's really where we learn a lot, spending time on the ground, delivering food, talking to drivers, talking to merchants. And we do that both in our region, right, like with our drivers, but we also do that quite intensely in other regions to learn from other global companies, right? Like 2 weeks ago, I was in San Francisco, so I visited a bunch of merchants there and asked them what their pain points are. Obviously, we're not operating a business there, but we can learn what like big global companies like DoorDash and Uber are doing. We did the same in China and India, right? Like, so we're really focused on immersing ourselves and learning as much as we can from the ground.
So as you think about the org design for your product team, and there are different dimensions here, you have multiple markets, but you also have multiple products. So how do you set up the team?
Basically, how we've set up our product teams, they're all regional, right? Like, so we have like basically like our product team owns the products across the region, and then they connect with the country teams very strongly and with product ops teams that we have in each country. But the product teams themselves are all regional. And then basically the way that we structure, we have like basically a structure we call tech families, right? Like, so tech family is like a domain where like the product engineers, designers, and so on are in. And we have basically two types of tech families. We have platform tech families that provide underlying capability that everybody uses. And then we have business tech families that are in one vertical, right? Like, so we would have a team like, let's say, a mobility tech family that that owns like the mobility product. And then we would have a tech family, which we call fulfillment, which basically owns the marketplace and the drivers that serve mobility, food, groceries, and all the other use cases. So that's kind of like how we structure our teams, that they basically provide like platforms that are common, and then for the specific use cases. And these tech families work very, very closely together across like engineering, product, analytics, design, and so on.
You are the grandpa for the families. So as you think about the platform, that's another interesting situation here, right? Like I can imagine as you talk about hyper-localizing your product to a specific market, there might be certain features or even products as a whole that are enabled in different markets. So how do you go about creating a platform that is, strong enough to give you that flexibility to switch features and other functionality on and off?
Yeah. So our general mindset is what we call internally like 80-20, right? Like ideally 80% of the platform is kind of like the same for everything. And then we customize where we make sense, right? Like, and there's a bunch of reasons on where we need to customize, right? Like one is obviously regulations, right? Like laws across our countries are very, very different, right? Like, so there's like, let's say in Jakarta, there's a rule that certain cars with a certain license plate cannot drive on some days of the week, right? Like, so we need to make sure that when we do give you a car, that it's a car that can reach you, right? Like, so we need to make sure that's something that's like very specific to a law in Indonesia, for example, right? Like, so we customize for those things, or then we customize for some specific things where we really learn there's some behaviors in the market. So the way that this works is we have obviously our country teams and we have product ops teams in each country that basically surface those needs and really like are the voice of the users in those markets to our product teams, that they can like then see what are the things that we customize for each market while maintaining like a coherent like general platform, obviously.
There's a few other milestones that I want to dig into. So first of all, you guys are a public company. You are listed in the US stock exchange, right? So what was the rationale behind that?
The rationale behind listing like in the US specifically, or
without operating in the US, right?
I mean, it's just like the most like meaningful like market for any tech stock to list, right? Like, so I think basically the maturity in the US as a market is obviously the most advanced versus like markets in our region. And I think the other thing is we've always seen ourselves as a global tech company, right? Like, as I said earlier with immersions, we learn a lot from our global like peers and partners, right? Like, I mean, so we always like had the aspiration to be like a global tech company operating out and for Southeast Asia.
And you also reach profitability. I mean, that's insane. You guys have I was checking yesterday, a market valuation of over $15 billion and you achieve profitability.
Yeah, we're pretty happy.
So those are like kind of opposite levers in a way, as you're trying to optimize for growth and also maintain a profitable profile. So when you are going about your strategic priorities, like help me understand, like, what is the secret sauce behind being able to achieve both goals?
I'm not sure if there's like a secret sauce behind any of that, but basically like we all like to think that in Southeast Asia, there's still so much more potential. So we're still very early. So we're generally a company that has a longer term outlook and like all the businesses and products that we're building, right? Like, we know just that there's so much potential in this region. So basically, the way that we look at it in our overall planning is, so we have a 3-year strategy and vision, right? Like, so we have like a product vision that outlines where do we want to take our product in the future. We have a corporate strategy that outlines where do we want to take the company in the future. And then we plan basically backwards from that, right? Like, so basically we look at like what does like the future look like, and then plan like what do we need to do in the next half to get closer to achieving that vision. And I think for us, right, like what we know is in Southeast Asia, we know that it is very, very important that we make our services accessible to as many people as possible, right? Like, so that's kind of like the aspiration. And so that's why like efficiency has always been at the core of what we do, right? Like, to make sure, like, for example, in food delivery, you can imagine if we can make our drivers more efficient, that they can make more deliveries per hour, we can at the same time have a boost to our profitability, but you can also give some of that as savings to our consumers, which will then use more. And then it drives this flywheel for our drivers to earn more, right? Like, so basically kind of the overarching theme for us is we try to get more people to use our services that can access them. And then basically we improve the livelihoods of our drivers at the same time. Right? Like, that's kind of the beauty of many of the projects that we're pushing that helps us in this dimension that you mentioned.
I want to dissect that a little more because, product people, we're obsessed with defining success metrics. And obviously revenue is a great goal, but there are so many other leading indicators that help you get there. And I would be curious to know if there are any specific leading indicators for you that you are trying to push. And I know you are in a three-sided marketplace, which makes it even more challenging, right? That you have the drivers, you have the customers, you have the merchants. So how do you go about identifying leading indicators for each of those groups?
That's a great question. And I mean, it's slightly different for the different verticals that we're in, but I can give you an example for one of them. How do we think about that, right? Like, so I think as a marketplace, right, like the leading indicators that we have, some of the most important ones that we look at is, one is a metric that we call fulfillment rate, right? Like saying like how many of the requests of, let's say, a trip you can match like a driver and a passenger, and if needed, a restaurant together, right? Like that at the end, really the match happens, because that's like the most important for any marketplace, right? Like if you come and like try to book a ride or order food, the most important is this like the fulfillment rate, right? Like that's kind of like the quality and the heartbeat of the marketplace, if you will. So that's one of the things that we really like deeply focus over. And then there's other metrics that measure the efficiency of the marketplace, right? Like, so let's say what I said earlier, right? Like in food deliveries, like one of the efficiency metrics that we would look at is how many deliveries per hour a driver can make, right? Like that's kind of like an efficiency metrics, because let's say if you can, what we call like batching, you can give a driver like 2 orders at the same time, then they're obviously more efficient. If you give them shorter routes to the restaurant and allocate them better, right? Like they're more efficient, right? Like that's very important. So we look a lot at these efficiency metrics as well. And then basically what we also would look at is like consumer love metrics, right? Like, so if you're ordering food, most of the times you're hungry, so you definitely want to have your food fast, right? Like we know that like nobody have ever asked me, can I have my food slow, right? Like everybody's like, yeah, I want to have my food faster. I'm very hungry, right? Like, so we would look at consumer love metrics, like how long from like pressing the button does it take to the food reaching you? And that's kind of like where we would know, right? Like if we get those metrics all moving into the right direction, right? Like, so both the fulfillment metrics, then like our efficiency metrics, and then the consumer love metrics, then we know we're on a good track to basically provide a better service both to our drivers and to our consumers.
From a UX standpoint, I can imagine this must be really challenging to create simple experiences given how many use cases you cover. So what's the way you go about ensuring that especially a new user understands the different opportunities within your super app?
You're right? Like, I mean, it's definitely right. Like there's like many things in the Grab app to discover. And you're right. Like, I mean, we want to make sure if somebody new lands in Southeast Asia, that they really quickly can learn how to adapt our app, and like also like people in Southeast Asia, that they can learn really quickly. So I think the way that we think about this is like, if you were to like open our home screen, you see basically like a selection of those services, and you see like some content what we predict might be relevant on you based on what we know, right? Like if you're a new user, then a lot of that information would be like kind of like new things that we know most users care about. Like let's say if you land in Southeast Asia and open our app the first time in the airport, then we know very likely what Carlos is looking for is a ride from the airport maybe to his hotel, right? Like, so we would predict if you would open the app in the airport, we said most likely transport is what we care about. Like it's not super likely that at the airport you would order food that arrives at the airport, right? Like, I mean, you can if you really want to, but it's not likely, right? Like, so what we do is we predict what you're likely going to do. We surface that very strongly, but give you the option to select everything else, right? Like, so that's how we make it simpler for you as a user to learn and surface the most relevant services to you. So we've spent like many years perfecting our data science and prediction models, obviously. So that's basically kind of like how we combine offering the power from a full super app, but also not trying to overwhelm users. And the second thing what we do is we really believe in tying services together, right? Like we've seen a lot of users really love that, right? Like a simple example for me, when I ride home on my way after work, usually I want to order food, right? Like, so what I would do is I like send a group order link to my wife, say like, hey, do we want to order something? And I can do that, and it ties perfectly in the transport flow. Because if I open the app, even if I'm still at the office, if I'm on a ride home, it already knows the next order I want to do is for home and not to the office, because it knows where I'm going, right? Like, so by Grab knowing that I'm on a transport ride home, it predicts that my next thing is like a food order at home. And potentially I can like, again, invite my wife to a group order. And that's kind of like where these things come together, that like once we see that people use transport very frequently, then they start onboarding on food orders and on groceries and on other services, because they tie very well together.
Totally. I mean, you have all the data about the user, their family, their financials, if they bank with you. And then from there, you can find other ways to add value. That's the ultimate dream, right? For building this type of mode. And one of the things that I also want to cover with you is how you go about building versus buying certain aspects of your product. Like here, as you know, we're very used to integrating with third-party APIs and trying to buy as much as possible through SaaS products. So, but I know that in your case, the Grab Maps was a very interesting case, right? Because there was a reason why you actually had to build the thing and not just integrate with an existing API. So why don't you tell us more about that rationale?
That's right. Like, so at the end of the day, right, like we always try to work with existing solutions if they cover the needs for our markets, right? Like, but what we often see is that Southeast Asia, often for a lot of global tech companies, is not like their primary considerations, right? Like, I mean, and primarily because like the unit economics here are very, very different, right? Like, so I think what we've learned, we need to like operate, right, like at a very, very different unit economics level than like let's say you would in the US or in Europe or in other like really rich markets, right? Like, so that's kind of like the one thing. And for Grab Maps specifically, as I said earlier, right, like what we've learned is really for us having the mapping data that none of the other global providers would give us was super, super critical, right? Like it's what I said earlier, right? Like these narrow side streets that many of our consumers live on, and they expect the food coming to their front door. They expect the driver picking them up on a motorcycle coming to their front door. So it's not an option to not map that, right? Like, or like another example is like in some of our markets, right, like there's these gated communities, right? Like, and many people would live inside these communities, and we need to make sure they have like a gate where the driver can come in, and they like need to register and so on, right? Like those are services that we need to understand, right? Like we need to like make sure that we like really send the driver to the right gate and like route him into the right thing. Like in Southeast Asia, they have many like big like apartment complexes with many buildings. And if you book the rider, we need to exactly map which is the pickup point, right? Like, are you in this block or in that block, right? Like, so that's super, super important. So like basically what we've seen is we've started building this once we've realized that none of the global companies would really provide us this information. And the North Star for us is always like, we really want to provide a seamless experience to our consumers, right? Like that's the rationale in building it.
I think this is a masterclass on localization. I think sometimes there can be a misconception around expanding a market is translating the website or the mobile app and maybe allowing the new currency. And I like those specific cases that you are detailing, I think so helpful to identify like why you have to go deep into a very specific market to have the right to win.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's honestly also as a product person, it's an insane luxury for us that we can really experience this on the ground and really solve users' problems, right? Like that's what keeps me going, that I know whatever we do to make this better will make the lives of our users and drivers ultimately better and more seamless, right? Like, so that's why I'm really, really passionate about this.
I am also thinking about, like, from a pure like prioritization standpoint, it's easier to prioritize the higher value customers. So if you are operating across different markets and one of the markets is in Europe or the US, it's easier to then prioritize those type of customers, right? While if you are in a different type of market, you need to really focus on your customers, and maybe they have a different type of purchasing power, but you are also providing so many more services that ultimately you are getting more of their share of the wallet.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, right? Like, I mean, it's exactly right that we still see, right, like getting a higher frequency from our users, right? Like by enabling them to use our services is a key driver for us, right? Like we still think there's so many opportunities to create like more opportunities for our consumers to leverage what we're building. That's exactly the right way to think about it.
I would talk about the future with you. I mean, you mentioned you lived in San Francisco. You were here a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure you saw the self-driving cars going around, robots delivering food, cloud kitchens. So like, how is all of that innovation now applicable to your product?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about technology solving real user problems, right? Like, I mean, I'm by trade an engineer, so I'm definitely a nerd. So I just love like great technology. So it's like fills me with great joy to see all those things that you say, right? Like, so that for sure. But our passion is really like taking this technology and applying it to our users, right? Like, so we're bringing a lot of the, like, I mean, honestly, the last few years in tech, like the rise of like generative AI has been the most fun for me to work in tech, because we can finally solve problems that were almost like impossible to solve before, right? Like, and now, like, we have really powerful technology to solve some of those. And I think we have like many of these things, right? Like, so, I mean, and it's like, just to give you a sense of like the color of like what we can do, right? Like, so one big problem across our regions is languages, right? Like, in many cases, like, our countries are multilingual, right? Like, even within a country. So many cases, the passenger and the driver would not speak the same language, right? Like, and for many of our countries, like, for example, having this translation capability, right? Like, building our own data science model that really well translate across those things is super important, right? Like, or if you come tomorrow, visit us in Thailand, you might not be able to read the menus of merchants. So us translating them well, using like LLMs to translate them for you, right? Like, makes you suddenly available to like access all these products and so on, right? Like, so this is one of those things, right? Like, computer vision has been hugely game-changing for our mapping efforts, right? Like, we now, as I said, we build our own maps. We send our drivers with our own built AI hardware cameras across the streets, mapping all those streets. And like, now with computer vision, we can like make sense and process this information. So that's kind of like where we see that, like, basically like the leading edge technology can really help us build better products by allowing people experiencing them that they might have not in the past.
What is your product team based?
Across the region. So, I mean, we have offices all across the region, right? Like, so Singapore is our headquarter. So a big part of the team is here, but we have, large offices across all of the countries. Plus we have a team in China as well. So we have like basically like teams all across the broader region.
And from a product management and best practices standpoint, like, how do you ensure that you are A, identifying the right talent for your team, and B, they are executing with speed at scale, like many of the Silicon Valley companies that you know?
So, I mean, we're very global in nature, right? Like, so our product team comes from everywhere. Like, a lot of people have been either based in Silicon Valley, have been based in China and some of the prime tech markets before. So we have like basically people from everywhere, and we're very, very excited about that. And then I think the strongest thing is really like, are people excited about the mission, right? Like, as I said earlier, we're a very mission-driven company. So we really want to make sure that we have people that subscribe to what we want to accomplish, and like really like help like drive Southeast Asia forward. So that's super important. And then in terms of, right, like, how do we ensure that people have the right intensity that you mentioned, right? Like, so we have one of our cultural values is what we call hunger, right? Like, which is basically like that kind of like drive and like the ability to move fast. So, I mean, this is super, super important for us.
Philipp, that's my number one personal value that also a value for our company. So I connect with you on that front.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fascinating opportunity for me, and I hope for the listeners to see how you're building an incredible super app in Southeast Asia.
Thank you so much, Carlos. It was fun to chat.